Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: urgent warning of atrocities in Sudanese city, Cuba opens economy, Ethiopia. PM's party wins landslide as fears grow of new conflict, Gulf flights near pre-war levels, and Norway deep-sea drone to uncover hidden ocean secrets. Starting with politics, EU approves strictest ever migration law. The European Parliament approved a law aimed at speeding up the return of migrants with no legal right to remain in the EU, thanks to backing from centre-right and far-right political groups. It allows return hubs outside the bloc and home searches. Ethiopia PM's party wins landslide as fears grow of new conflict. Prime Minister Ahmed's Prosperity Party retained its overwhelming parliamentary majority. Despite the poll being overshadowed by conflict, accusations of repression, and little participation by opposition parties, Latin America's resurgent right notches another win in Colombia. Political newcomer Abelardo de la Espriella won 49.7% of votes to defeat leftist rival Ivan Cepeda. By a thin margin, just 4 years the country elected Gustavo Petro, its first left-wing president. De la Espriella's win is the latest in a wave of right-wing leadership across Latin America, from El Salvador's Bukele to Chile's Cast and Argentina's Milei, with Peru following suit, with Keiko Fujimori leading its presidential leadership contest. Zimbabwe's parliament approves bill to extend Mnangagwa's term. Amid heightened political tensions in the country, it adds 2 years to the president's current term, keeping him in power until 2030, and lengthens the terms of the president, MPs, councillors and mayors from 5 to 7 years. Mnangagwa has been in power since 2017, following the popular military-backed ouster of mentor and longtime ruler Robert Mugabe, who died in 2019. Bolsonaro's son sentenced to 4 years jail for seeking US interference in father's Brazil coup trial. Eduardo Bolsonaro, who moved to the US in 2025, tried to get sanctions put on judges trying his father, Brazil's former far-right president, who is serving 27 years in prison for plotting a coup in 2022 after losing the elections to Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Moving to stories in conflict, UN urgent warning on increasing likelihood of atrocities in Sudanese city of El Obeid. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces are moving into position for a large-scale attack. Approximately 500,000 civilians are believed to be trapped within the city, where RSF fighters have kept up continuous drone bombardment at long range. The impending siege at El Obeid mirrors events at El Fasher in 2025, where the RSF carried out acts of genocide that are believed to have resulted in tens of thousands of civilian deaths. Ukraine hits Moscow with biggest drone strike yet. The attack, which damaged the Russian capital's main oil refinery, was part of Kyiv's new drone warfare strategy, powered by millions of upgraded mid-range drones capable of targeting refineries and unarmored transports behind the front lines. Britain will provide 150,000 drones to Ukraine by the end of 2026 as part of a $996 million funding package, backed by proceeds from immobilized Russian sovereign assets. Egypt airstrikes against Sudanese gold mining sites. The strikes are the latest sign that Egypt is escalating its involvement against Sudanese groups near the nation's border, after recent action to destroy supply lines sustaining the paramilitary RSF from Libyan territory. At least 7 miners were killed in the strike in the Halab Triangle, which is claimed as both Sudanese and Egyptian territory. South Korea to reduce security buffer zone to North Korea. South Korea will ease restrictions on roughly 270 square kilometers of land near the border with North Korea. Farmers in the area have long complained of rules that complicated working conditions. Pakistan rises to global diplomatic stakeholder in Iran war mediation.
The breakthrough drew on Pakistan's rare ability to maintain trusted relationships simultaneously with Iran, the US, China, and Gulf states, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. Personal diplomacy proved decisive, with Army Chief Asim Munir's visits to Tehran and his rapport with US President Trump widely credited as the moment Washington began to view Islamabad as a viable backchannel.
Now for the latest economics news. Cuba's Communist Party approves opening economy. In the biggest economic shift since the 1950s revolution, new free market reforms would expand opportunities for private enterprise and create measures to attract foreign investment, including from Cubans abroad. It could also set the stage for private real estate development and the transformation of state-owned businesses into private commercial ventures, plus allow private banks to enter the once state-dominated finance sector. It comes amid economic pain from increasing US sanctions. Default rate among private credit borrowers highest in 3-year history. Adding to signs of stress in the $1.8 trillion industry, it comes against a backdrop of elevated borrowing costs as inflation remains elevated in the wake of conflict in the Middle East. Concerns over direct lenders' underwriting standards and exposure to AI-vulnerable software businesses has also led to a rise in redemption requests as investors worry about defaults. Gulf Airlines flights near pre-war levels. The overall number of flights by major Gulf airlines, including Emirates, Qatar, and Etihad, has now returned to some 82% of the pre-war level on February 27th. The Middle East is home to some of the world's biggest carriers, whose networks have been upended by the Iran conflict, with Iranian missile and drone attacks at times shutting airports in recent months and redrawing traffic routes across the Gulf. Yen near 40-year low as BOJ hike fails to stop falls. The Japanese currency found little relief even after the Ministry of Finance's dollar-selling intervention earlier this year, and the Bank of Japan hiked interest rates to a 31-year high last week. Concerns around the spending plans of Prime Minister Takaichi have undermined investor confidence and prompted speculation that more intervention could follow. Chipmaker SK Hynix overtakes Samsung to become South Korea's most valuable company. The chipmaker nearly collapsed under debt 2 decades ago, but is now the dominant supplier of high-bandwidth memory, HBM chips used in AI systems for customers such as Nvidia and Alphabet's Google, has emerged as one of the biggest beneficiaries of the global AI boom, propelling a more than 340% rally in its shares this year and lifting its market value to $1.35 trillion, above both Samsung Electronics and Micron. Turning to development. Canada signs $1.75 billion deal to build Australian long-range radar system. The Australian system, developed over 40 years, works by refracting high-frequency electromagnetic waves off the ionosphere to detect distant objects that are invisible to conventional radars because of Earth's curvature. The deal is Australia's largest ever defence export and is the first phase of a pact to provide early warning radar coverage from the Canada-US border into the Arctic. The nations had previously agreed to increase cooperation on defence technologies, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals. India's cash transfer boom gives relief to the poor but strains budgets. The world's fastest-growing major economy is increasingly dependent on dole to keep its poorest people out of poverty. Over the past decade, government cash transfers, particularly directed at women and farmers, have become a major welfare tool for poverty eradication, growing more than 20 times from under $2 billion in 2015 to nearly $30 billion. They now constitute just under 1% of India's GDP and over 10% of its social sector spending, and this growth outpaces spending increases on flagship social schemes that guarantee food security and employment. China restricts exports to US defense firms in response to sanctions on its big tech. Chinese companies would be blocked from exporting dual-use goods that can have military as well as non-military applications to 10 US companies, which include military drone makers and some involved in rare earth mining. Earlier, the US added several tech companies, including Alibaba and Baidu, to its list of firms that it says have links to the Chinese military. AI models capable of cyber attacks on governments and business months away. While AI would help improve cyber defense over time, it also accelerates the speed, scale, and sophistication of cyber threats, warned intelligence agencies for the Five Eyes. The rare public intervention by signals agencies for Australia, the US, the UK, New Zealand, and Canada comes after the US administration blocked foreign nationals from using a new AI model built by tech company Anthropic called Fable. Europe seeking to reduce reliance on China for rare earths. New recycling technologies aim to make the EU more self-sufficient by recovering key materials from used magnets, which can support EV growth and a circular economy. Rare earth elements like neodymium are essential for electric vehicle motors, but supply remains heavily reliant on China. As demand for EVs grows, new recycling technologies are emerging to recover rare earths from used magnets, supporting a circular economy and reducing dependency on imports. Finally, our social news. Your brain can keep improving into your 90s, study finds. A 3-year study of nearly 4,000 adults ranging from age 19 to 94 found that brain health can improve at any age, challenging the common belief that mental sharpness must decline as we get older. Participants spent just a few minutes a day on brain training activities, and researchers found measurable gains across multiple aspects of brain health, including thinking clarity, emotional well-being, and sense of purpose. UAE sets minimum social media age at 15, mandates age checks. It becomes the first Arab country to introduce such a restriction as governments worldwide seek to address growing concerns over the impact of online platforms on children. Under 15-year-olds in the UAE will be prohibited from creating, using, or operating personal social media accounts, while social media companies will be required to implement robust age verification measures, including digital identity checks and artificial intelligence-supported technologies. The artificial ice pyramids saving India's mountain villages. A solar-powered automated system pipes high-altitude water to valley floors, where it freezes into towering pyramids that replace glaciers lost to climate change. Beyond supplying irrigation water, communities report the structures are recharging groundwater and reviving natural springs, suggesting benefits that extend well into the dry season. Fossils challenge assumptions on how animals adapted to land. A macaroni-sized juvenile embolomere fossil from 309 million-year-old Illinois beds shows direct development rather than the tadpole-like features scientists expected, upending the prevailing theory of how early water creatures transitioned to land. The finding suggests the evolutionary path to land-dwelling vertebrates may have bypassed amphibian-style metamorphosis entirely, with some species developing their adult form from birth. Norway sends deep-sea drone 20,000 feet down to uncover hidden ocean secrets. The Huygens Superior, described as the world's most capable autonomous underwater vehicle, uses sonar, cameras, laser profilers, and chemical sensors to map geological features and detect substances including methane and carbon dioxide at depths previously inaccessible to Norwegian researchers. Until now, the country had relied on private contractors for such surveys, making this state-owned mission a step toward independent management of its deep-sea territories.
That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.